Good evening, seekers. Tonight, the archive opens onto a city that has forgotten how to introduce itself. Beyond the last shelf and the final pool of candlelight, a stone passage descends toward a plain washed silver by the moon. Rain has passed here. The earth is dark and quiet. Far ahead, low walls rise from the ground in lines, forming streets that once carried footsteps, wheels, voices, and water. No gate bears the name of a king. No monument explains who ruled. No inscription waits to be read aloud. The city remains, but its voice is closed. We enter slowly. The first streets are broader than expected. Their edges meet one another with a sense of order that feels almost familiar. Brick walls stand where homes and workshops once pressed together beneath the sun. Openings lead into rooms whose roofs disappeared long ago. Stairways climb toward floors that no longer exist. Beneath the road, covered channels follow the path of the city, built to carry water away from houses. Wells descend into the earth. Courtyards hold the shape of vanished mornings. Everywhere there is evidence of thought, planning, agreement, and daily care. Yet the people themselves remain just beyond reach. They left behind beads polished smooth by patient hands. They left copper tools, painted vessels, stone weights, and thousands of seals carved with animals and signs. Some show bulls with heavy shoulders. Others show elephants, rhinoceroses, or a strange single-horned creature that appears again and again. Above these animals are short rows of symbols. The marks are precise. They were made deliberately and repeated across a civilization that stretched farther than many ancient kingdoms. But no one living can say with certainty what they mean. Perhaps a seal carried a name. Perhaps it identified a merchant, a household, a place, or an offering. Perhaps its signs recorded something ordinary that the people of the city understood. Whatever the answer, the words do not open for us. We can study their direction. We can compare one symbol with another. We can count how often they appear. Still, the silence remains. This is the great strangeness of the Indus world. It is not hidden because nothing survived. Much has survived. Its streets can still be followed. Its bricks can be measured. Its drains can be traced beneath the ground. Its ornaments can be held beneath museum light. The mystery comes from standing among so much evidence and realizing that the people who made it have not yet been allowed to speak in their own language. Other ancient societies left royal inscriptions, lists of victories, prayers to named gods, and tombs filled with titles. Here, certainty arrives more quietly. We see a civilization in the things it repeated. Bricks shaped to shared proportions, weights made according to common standards, cities connected by trade and custom, water guided through homes with remarkable attention. These details suggest a vast human agreement, maintained across generations and great distances. Yet the agreement itself was never explained to us. So tonight, we will not begin with a dramatic collapse or a vanished treasure. We will begin with a question. How did so many people build such ordered cities without leaving behind the kinds of kings, palaces, and readable declarations that dominate the story of the ancient world? What held their society together? What did they call their rivers, their cities, and themselves? And what changes when a civilization can be seen clearly but cannot be heard? The moon rises higher over the broken walls. Water gathers in shallow places along the old street. Somewhere beyond the ruins, the river moves through darkness, as it has for thousands of years, carrying silt toward fields that have fed countless generations. The city does not answer our questions. It offers only its shape. For now, that will be enough. We will follow the brick roads inward. We will pause beside the wells and descend toward the hidden drains. We will hold the seals close to the lantern and study the signs that refuse to become words. Before the night is over, we may not solve the Indus question, but we may come to understand why its silence has endured and why that silence still feels so full of human presence. Section 2. Long before the streets of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were laid beneath the sun, the rivers had already begun shaping the world around them. The Indus descended from distant mountains and moved south through plains of clay and silt. Tributaries carried water from valleys and highlands into the greater river system. Their courses shifted slowly across the land. Floods spread fresh soil over the fields. In some seasons, the water arrived gently. In others, it came with enough force to alter the earth. The people who lived here learned to follow those changes. At first, their settlements were small. Families raised crops, kept animals, shaped clay vessels, and built homes from mud brick. Wheat and barley grew in prepared fields. Villages formed where water, pasture, and workable soil could be found together. They did not yet resemble the great cities that would come later, but their habits would endure for centuries. A river is never only water. It is a road, a source of food, a boundary, a danger, and a promise. It carries reeds, clay, fish, and boats. It leaves behind mud that can be shaped into walls. And because it never remains still, it teaches those who live beside it to watch closely. The farmers of the Indus region learned when the rivers might rise. They understood where the soil held moisture and where it dried too quickly. They dug wells and guided water where it was needed. A field that produced grain one year might fail in the next. A channel might fill with sediment. Survival depended on memory, patience, and cooperation. Farther east, other waterways crossed what is now northwestern India. Some flowed more strongly in the ancient past. Their exact courses remain uncertain because rivers abandon old channels and carve new paths. Sites beside dried beds suggest that communities once gathered near water that later moved elsewhere. This changing geography matters because the Indus civilization was never confined to one river. Its settlements appeared across an enormous region. Some stood beside the Indus and its tributaries. Others rose near seasonal streams, fertile plains, coastal routes, or the edges of dry country. The civilization joined these landscapes through trade, shared crafts, and common systems of measurement. Water made much of this possible, but the people were not simply carried by the rivers. They studied them, adapted to them, and built connections across the spaces between them. There was no single morning when the Indus civilization suddenly appeared. The great cities emerged from a longer history of farmers, traders, and skilled craftspeople. Pottery styles changed. Building methods became more consistent. Settlements expanded. Shell moved inland from the coast. Stone arrived from distant hills. Copper passed through workshops where it became tools and ornaments. Each movement left a faint line across the landscape. A bead found far from the stone from which it was cut tells us that someone carried it. A shell bracelet discovered deep inland suggests a route reaching toward the sea. A shared brick proportion appearing in distant settlements hints that ideas traveled with builders and merchants. By the time the first great urban centers rose, the land had already been crossed by generations of movement and exchange. Harappa grew near the Ravi River. Mohenjo-daro stood within the wider Indus system farther south. Other settlements appeared across the plains and toward the coast. Together, they formed not one isolated kingdom, but a broad civilization tied together by roads, waterways, customs, and familiar forms. Yet even in its most ordered cities, the river remained beyond complete control. Floodwater could nourish fields, but it could also damage walls and bury streets beneath silt. Channels could shift away from settlements that depended upon them. Entire neighborhoods could be rebuilt over older foundations. At Mohenjo-daro, The city rose in layers as people repaired and built upon what had come before. This was not a world built against nature. It was a world built in conversation with it. The rivers gave the civilization its fields, roots, clay, and gathering places. They also demanded patience. The people who lived beside them understood that permanence did not mean stillness. A city could endure while being repaired. A tradition could continue while changing its form. Tonight, as we follow the river southward beneath the moon, the lights of the first cities begin to appear through the mist. Walls rise beyond the fields. Wells open in private courtyards. Kilns glow beside workshops. Boats move quietly across the dark water. The rivers have brought us to the edge of the urban world. Ahead, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro wait beneath the night, built from millions of bricks and centuries of accumulated knowledge. Section 3. By the time modern archaeologists arrived at Harappa, the ancient city had never truly been lost. People lived beside its mounds. Farmers crossed ground where walls slept beneath the soil. Bricks from the ruins had been carried away for generations and reused nearby. During the 19th century, many were taken for railway construction. To those gathering them, the bricks were useful material. Few could have known that they belonged to one of the earliest urban civilizations on Earth. The mounds appeared as broad rises in the landscape. Wind and rain had softened their edges. Grass grew across them. Paths passed over buried rooms and streets. Whatever name the people of Harappa had once given their home had disappeared from memory. The nearby village preserved the name by which the ancient site would later be known. Early visitors noticed pottery, walls, and carved objects. Among the most intriguing finds were small seals marked with unfamiliar signs. Their animals were carefully shaped. Their writing resembled no script scholars could recognize. Yet a few isolated objects were not enough to reveal what remained underground. The change came slowly. In 1921, the archaeologist Daya Ramsani began major excavations at Harappa under the Archaeological Survey of India. Trenches entered the mounds and exposed brick structures beneath the surface. Walls emerged in layers. Streets and platforms suggested a settlement far larger and older than expected. The strange seals appeared again, carrying the same short lines of symbols. Far to the south, another field of ruins waited near the Indus River in Sindh. Its modern name was Mohenjo-daro, often translated as the Mound of the Dead. In 1922, the archaeologist Rakal Das Banerjee examined the site and recognized remains resembling those at Harappa. The distance between the two places made the connection extraordinary. These were not neighboring towns sharing a local style. They were separated by hundreds of miles. As excavation continued, the pattern became impossible to dismiss. The same kinds of seals appeared at both sites. Bricks followed familiar proportions. Pottery, ornaments, weights, and construction methods pointed toward a connected cultural world. Beneath the dust lay evidence of a civilization that had once stretched across a vast region, yet had almost vanished from written history. In 1924, John Marshall, then Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, announced the importance of the discoveries. The news changed the known history of South Asia. These cities belonged to a much earlier age, standing beside Egypt and Mesopotamia among the ancient urban worlds. The revelation was both sudden and incomplete. Archaeologists could uncover walls, but they could not restore the voices that once moved between them. They could identify workshops and wells. They could trace roads and drains, but the script remained unreadable, and no surviving account explained who founded the cities or what their inhabitants called themselves. Even the name Indus civilization comes from the geography through which modern scholars approached it. Harappan civilization comes from the first major site to be excavated. Both are useful names given from the outside. The people themselves almost certainly used other words, but those words remain sealed inside the signs they left behind. This rediscovery did not begin with a royal tomb or a single inscription naming a king. Recognition emerged piece by piece. One wall joined another. One seal resembled a seal found far away. A pattern of bricks became a pattern of streets. Slowly, the mounds changed from isolated ruins into the remains of an entire civilization. The work also revealed how much had already been lost. Ancient bricks had been removed. Erosion had worn away exposed ground. Later occupation had disturbed earlier layers. Excavation could reveal only a small part of each city at a time. Every trench opened a window, but no window showed the whole world beneath it. Still, what appeared was enough to transform understanding. Harappa and Mohenjo-daro had been living cities. People cooked in their homes, carried water from wells, shaped beads in workshops, and walked streets laid out with care. Children crossed courtyards now open to the sky. Merchants handled seals whose meanings are now debated. Generations repaired walls and rebuilt rooms until the city became a layered record of ordinary life. Tonight, we stand at the edge of those first trenches and imagine the moment when a buried wall appeared beneath an archaeologist's hand. One brick became a line, the line became a room, the room became a street, and the street led toward a civilization no history book had yet described. The cities had waited beneath the earth for thousands of years. Now they had returned, not with their names restored, but with their silence made visible. Section 4. From the edge of the excavation, the city begins to take shape. A wall becomes the side of a house. A narrow passage opens into a courtyard. Beyond it, another lane joins a broader street. The farther we walk, the more the ruins reveal a pattern. Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were not collections of buildings that happened to gather beside a river. Their neighborhoods were arranged with intention. Roads divided the city into blocks. Houses faced lanes and courtyards. Raised areas stood above lower districts. Beneath the stillness of the bricks was a long history of planning and repair. At Mohenjo-daro, major streets crossed one another in an orderly grid. Smaller lanes entered residential areas where homes stood close together behind thick walls. Many houses turned inward rather than opening widely onto the street. Their rooms gathered around private courtyards where light and air could enter. From there, families moved between cooking spaces, sleeping rooms, stairways, and places for washing. The city did not present itself through one grand avenue leading toward a royal palace. Instead, its order appeared everywhere at once. It could be found in the width of a lane, the direction of a wall, and the way one building respected the line of another. It appeared in platforms built above the floodplain and in neighborhoods reconstructed over older foundations. Even when houses changed, the larger shape of the city often endured. This required more than skilled builders. Bricks had to be made, carried, counted, and laid in enormous numbers. Clay was gathered and mixed. Molds shaped each block. Some bricks dried beneath the sun. Others were fired until they became strong enough for wells, drains, baths, and walls exposed to water. Across much of the mature Indus world, builders repeatedly used bricks with a familiar proportion. Their length was roughly twice their width, and their width roughly twice their thickness. A brick is a simple object, but repetition gives it power. When builders agree upon a proportion, walls can meet more easily. Corners can be planned. Repairs become more predictable. The same ideas can travel from one settlement to another. A mason arriving from a distant city may still recognize the logic before him. The bricks were not identical in every place or century. Local conditions mattered. Mud brick remained common, while fired brick was useful where water or structural demands were greater. Yet, the repeated proportions reveal a habit of measurement that extended beyond one workshop. That coherence appears at Harappa as well. The site contained raised mounds, substantial walls, working areas, streets, drains, and neighborhoods that changed through time. Its surviving ruins are more fragmentary than those of Mohenjo-daro, partly because so many ancient bricks were removed. Still, both cities belonged to the same wider tradition. Their builders did not copy one perfect plan. They worked within a common architectural language. We should be careful not to imagine one ancient engineer standing above the civilization with a finished map. Cities grow through negotiation. Walls are repaired. Houses are divided. Workshops expand. Streets collect debris and rise. Floods force rebuilding. New generations inherit structures made by older hands and alter them for new needs. The remarkable thing is that recognizable standards survived through so much change. Somewhere behind that endurance were decisions. Someone determined where a wall could stand. Someone maintained a street. Someone organized labor for a public structure. Someone supplied bricks in the required quantities. Yet the names and titles of those people have disappeared. Without readable records, we cannot easily see whether authority belonged to councils, officials, merchants, priests, or rulers whose monuments have not survived. The city gives us organization without introducing the organizers. We recognize the results of civic planning, but the institutions behind them remain hidden. We can walk along a straight street and understand that many households accepted its boundary. We can measure thousands of bricks and know that builders shared expectations. We can see private homes existing within a larger system, even when its rules remain unknown. As night settles over Mohenjo-daro, the grid fades into shadow. Broad streets become dark lines between pale walls. Doorways open onto courtyards where families once gathered after the heat of the day. Above them, vanished rooms would have caught the evening breeze. Below them, channels waited to carry used water away. The measurements of the city are leading us downward. In the next streets, the clearest sign of Indus planning will not be found in a tower or palace. It will be found beneath our feet, where wells, bathing floors, drains, and covered channels reveal a civilization shaped by water. Section 5. The streets of Mohenjo-daro lead us toward one of the quietest achievements of the ancient world. Beside a house wall, a narrow opening descends into a well lined with carefully fitted brick. In a nearby courtyard, a raised floor slopes toward a small channel. Water poured here would pass through an opening in the wall and enter a drain beyond. Farther along the street, other channels join larger ones. Some are covered by long bricks or stone slabs. Some include chambers where silt could settle before the water continued onward. Nothing about this system announces itself from a distance. There is no tower above it. No carved ruler claims credit for its construction. Much of it lies beneath the road, hidden from view and designed for an ordinary task. Yet the drains, wells, bathing floors, and soak pits reveal a form of civic care that reached deeply into daily life. At Mohenjo-daro, many wells stood within private buildings, while others could be reached from public streets. Their circular shafts were built from wedge-shaped bricks laid in strong rings. Some served households for generations and were rebuilt as surrounding floors rose. A person drawing water may have stood where a parent or grandparent once stood, lowering a vessel into the darkness and waiting to hear it touch the surface below. From the well, water entered the life of the house. It was carried into courtyards and bathing rooms. Floors were paved and gently sloped so used water could escape. Small drains passed through walls. Jars or settling vessels may have caught heavier material. Beyond the home, street drains carried the flow onward. We should not imagine modern plumbing hidden beneath an ancient city. Water was drawn and carried by hand. The channels required cleaning. Some drains ended in soak pits rather than one great sewer. Still, the connection between private washing spaces and public drainage shows that builders understood how one household belonged within the larger life of a street. Clean water and used water followed different paths. That distinction seems simple, but cities depend upon it. When many people live close together, ordinary acts become shared concerns. Washing, cooking, rain, mud, and waste all affect the spaces beyond one doorway. A blocked drain can trouble everyone farther along its path. Covers had to be lifted, deposits removed, damaged bricks replaced. The city was not only built, it had to be cared for. Above the lower streets stood a structure now called the Great Bath. Its name is modern, and its exact purpose remains uncertain. The central tank was built from fired brick and made resistant to leakage. Steps descended into the water from opposite ends. Rooms and passages surrounded it, while a nearby well may have helped supply it. Its careful construction suggests that the pool mattered. Perhaps people entered it for ritual purification. Perhaps it served an important communal ceremony. Its design allows those possibilities, but no inscription tells us who used it or what they believed. The water has vanished, leaving only the brick basin and its questions. Even so, the Great Bath should not distract us from the smaller bathing floors scattered through the city. Those private spaces show that attention to water did not belong only to rare ceremonies. It entered the household and shaped rooms, walls, floors, lanes, and the underground routes beneath them. Other Indus settlements reveal similar concerns, though no two cities were identical. Some communities depended upon rivers, others collected water in reservoirs or drew it from deep wells. What joined them was a repeated effort to organize life around access, movement, and disposal. This may be why the Indus cities feel so unusual. In many ancient places, the most visible remains celebrate kings, warfare, or the gods. Here, some of the clearest evidence of collective organization appears in structures made for daily use. A well does not tell us the name of a ruler. A drain does not describe a conquest. But together, they show decisions made for people who needed to drink, wash, work, and live beside one another. As rain begins again over the ruins, water finds the old slopes. It gathers on a courtyard floor and slips toward a channel worn silent by time. It passes beneath a wall and disappears into the dark line of a covered drain. For a moment, the city seems to remember what it was designed to do. The hidden channels carry us toward another mystery. Across cities separated by great distances, builders used familiar measures. Merchants trusted carefully shaped weights. Craftspeople repeated forms with remarkable consistency. Beneath the variety of Indus life was an agreement we can see everywhere, though no surviving voice explains who created it or how it was maintained. Section 6. Beyond the wells and covered drains, another pattern begins to appear. It is found in objects small enough to rest in the palm. Cubes of stone, carefully shaped weights, beads drilled with patient precision, bricks made according to familiar proportions, seals carved in distant cities yet marked by the same visual language. Alone, each object seems ordinary. Together, they reveal something remarkable. Across the Indus world, people trusted shared measures. A merchant weighing grain in one settlement could use a system recognized far away. A craftsperson shaping ornaments could work within standards understood beyond the walls of one city. Builders produced bricks that followed proportions familiar to other builders. Towns and regions still had their own materials and customs, but beneath that variety was a quiet agreement. The stone weights are among the clearest signs. Many were cut into simple geometric forms and polished smooth. Their sizes followed repeated units. Smaller weights could be combined to match larger ones. The system was not identical in every place or century, yet the pattern was strong enough to support exchange across a vast territory. Imagine a market opening in the early morning. Baskets of grain arrive from nearby fields. Cotton, pottery, shell ornaments, copper tools, and beads of red carnelian are set out for trade. A merchant places a stone weight on one side of a balance. Goods are added to the other until the beam settles. The people watching do not need the method explained. They already understand what the weight means. Trust enters the exchange through repetition. A measure recognized again and again becomes part of daily life. It allows strangers to trade. It lets goods travel farther from the hands that made them. It creates expectations. If a weight is false, the deception can be noticed. If the standard is shared, value can move across distance with less uncertainty. The same quiet logic appears in the crafts. Indus bead makers worked with materials gathered from many regions. Carnelian could be heated to deepen its color, then shaped, polished, and drilled through its length. Some beads required extraordinary control. Tiny holes passed through hard stone without shattering it. Shell was cut into bracelets. Faience became bright ornaments. Copper and bronze became tools and vessels. These workshops were places of knowledge. The craftsperson understood heat, pressure, rhythm, and material. A stone drilled too quickly might crack. A furnace held at the wrong temperature could ruin hours of labor. Skills were learned through practice and carried between generations. Certain settlements became known for particular kinds of production, while finished goods traveled along roads and waterways. Standard forms helped connect those workshops. A bead made near one city could be traded in another. A seal impression could identify goods or people. A weight could confirm an amount. A brick could fit the expectations of a builder who had never met the person who shaped it. This consistency raises a difficult question. Who maintained it? Perhaps officials inspected weights in markets. Perhaps merchant groups protected familiar standards. Perhaps councils, powerful households, or religious institutions supported the system. Perhaps the agreement endured because it was useful and passed forward without one ruler controlling every detail. The evidence shows coordination, but not the structure behind it. In other ancient civilizations, standards were sometimes announced through royal authority. A ruler might claim to establish a measure or protect honest trade. In the Indus world, no readable decree survives. No known inscription tells us who guaranteed the weights or punished those who cheated. We are left with the objects themselves. The agreement is visible, but the voices behind it are not. As evening settles over the market, the balance is packed away. Beads are wrapped in cloth. Stone weights are returned to a small container. Potters close their workshops. Across the city, thousands of ordinary actions continue within systems everyone seems to understand. No monument explains them. Perhaps that is why the Indus world feels so modern and so distant at once. Its organization appears not only in temples or tombs, but in measurement, drainage, construction, and trade. The civilization speaks through standards that made daily life possible. Tonight, we carry one small stone weight back into the archive. It is plain, dark, and almost perfectly shaped. It does not bear the face of a ruler. It does not describe a victory, yet it holds the memory of an agreement shared across cities. Beside it lies another object, smaller still, a seal carved with an animal and a row of unread signs. The measure tells us that people trusted a common system. The seal may tell us who they were, but first we must learn how to look at it. Section 7. The seal, waiting beside the stone weight, is small enough to disappear inside a closed hand. Its surface is cool and pale. An animal stands at its center, carved in profile with careful lines. Above it, a short row of signs crosses the top. On the back is a raised boss with a hole through it, perhaps so the seal could be carried on a cord. The object is modest, yet it belongs to one of the most recognizable traditions of the Indus world. Thousands of seals and seal impressions have been found across its cities and settlements. Many were carved from steatite, a soft stone shaped with fine detail before being hardened by heat. Their makers worked on a scale that demanded patience. A horn curves, a hoof is placed beneath the body, a row of symbols is fitted into a narrow space. The result is both image and message, though only half of that message remains open to us. The animals are often familiar. Bulls appear with powerful shoulders. Elephants, rhinoceroses, water buffalo, and other creatures emerge from the stone. Yet one figure appears more often than any other. It has a long body, a single horn, and a head lowered toward an object sometimes described as a stand or ritual vessel. Modern scholars often call it the unicorn, though its ancient name and meaning are unknown. It may have represented a clan, a merchant group, a place, a deity, or an idea that no longer has a simple name. The seal does not explain itself. Some may have been pressed into clay attached to goods, containers, doors, or bundles. A seal impression could mark ownership, identity, origin, or approval. It might protect something in transit or show that an exchange had been witnessed. Other seals may have been worn as personal objects. Some were found far from the cities where they were made, carried along ancient trade routes. Whatever their exact use, seals belong to systems of recognition. A person who saw one may have understood whose mark or authority it carried. The animal, the signs, and the shape of the object may have worked together. To us, they remain separate pieces of a language we can observe but not enter. There are scenes as well as animals. One famous seal shows a seated figure surrounded by creatures. Others present people, plants, composite beings, or actions that may have held ritual meaning. Such images invite interpretation, but they also demand restraint. A posture may resemble one known from a later tradition. A horned figure may remind us of a god described centuries afterward, yet resemblance is not proof. Without readable words, the safest approach is to notice carefully and claim slowly. The seals reward that patience. Their details reveal craftsmen who understood balance and repetition. Their presence across distant settlements suggests shared habits. Their inscriptions show that the signs were not random decoration. Certain symbols appear often. Some occur at the beginning or end of short sequences. Most inscriptions are brief, sometimes only a few signs long. That brevity is part of the mystery. A long royal inscription can repeat names and titles. A bilingual text can place two languages beside one another. A clay tablet may preserve accounts line after line. The Indus seals offer something much smaller. They may have recorded names, roles, commodities, institutions, or formulas known to the people who used them. But each example gives scholars only a narrow window. Still, the signs traveled. They appeared on seals, tablets, pottery, tools, ornaments, and small objects whose purposes are not always understood. Their repeated forms suggest a script used across a broad region for many generations. The civilization did not leave only images, it left writing. The silence comes from our inability to read it. As night settles over the workshop, a seal maker leans close to the stone. A lamp burns beside the hand. Powder gathers on the table. One careful line becomes the back of an animal. Another becomes a horn. Above it, the maker cuts signs already understood by merchants and officials who will see them elsewhere. There is no mystery in the room. The meaning is ordinary, familiar, and alive. Only time will make its secret. The finished seal is heated, polished, and placed into someone's keeping. It may travel with goods toward another city. It may pass through a market beside a balance and a set of stone weights. It may be pressed into wet clay, leaving an impression that outlives the hand that made it. Tonight, we hold that impression beneath the lantern. The animal remains clear. The symbols remain exact. The message has not faded. It is still present before us, and yet we cannot hear it. To understand why, we must move from the images on the seals to the signs above them and enter the most enduring question of the Indus civilization. A writing system survives. No one can read it. Section 8. The signs above the animals are waiting where we left them. Under the lantern, each mark seems almost familiar. One resembles a fish, another looks like a jar, a comb, or a figure carrying something across its shoulders. Some are simple, others are made from smaller shapes joined together. They return on seal after seal, arranged in short lines whose order was once understood without effort. Today, that order remains visible, but its meaning does not. Scholars have copied thousands of inscriptions into careful records. Certain signs appear often while others are rare. Some tend to occur near the beginning of a sequence. Others appear more often near the end. Many inscriptions seem to have been read from right to left, suggested by their spacing and arrangement. These patterns matter because writing is not random. A script follows habits. Signs form sequences shaped by language, names, numbers, titles, or familiar formulas. The Indus inscriptions show repeated order, yet order alone cannot tell us how a sign sounded, whether it stood for a word, a syllable, an idea, or some combination of these. The surviving texts are painfully brief. Most contain only a handful of signs. Even the longest examples would fill little more than a narrow strip across a small object. There are no surviving books from the Indus cities. No long account has been found describing a journey, a harvest, a ritual, or the life of a ruler. If longer texts were written on cloth, bark, wood, or leather, they have disappeared. What remains appears mostly on seals, tablets, pottery, tools, and ornaments. Other ancient scripts were opened through fortunate discoveries. Egyptian hieroglyphs could be compared with Greek on the Rosetta Stone. Cuneiform inscriptions in several languages allowed scholars to test names and signs against one another. The Indus world has given us no equivalent key. No object has yet been found carrying the same message in the Indus script and in a language we can already read. Without such a key, every proposed sound begins as a guess. The unknown language beneath the signs creates another obstacle. Some scholars have argued that it may have belonged to an early Dravidian language family. Others have explored different possibilities. Each proposal tries to connect the signs with later languages, archaeology, and repeated patterns. None has produced a decipherment accepted by most specialists. That does not make the attempts foolish. It means the evidence is narrow and the temptation to hear a desired answer is strong. A fish-shaped sign may have represented a fish. It may have represented the sound of a word that also meant something else. It may have carried a title, a number, or an idea we would never guess from its appearance. Pictures can become sounds, and the original image can disappear inside the habit of writing. There is even debate about the exact nature of the system. Most archaeologists describe the marks as an undeciphered script. Some researchers question whether they recorded full spoken language in the way familiar writing systems do. Perhaps the signs carried names, offices, families, goods, or compact identities. Perhaps they represented language through a structure still hidden from us. The inscriptions are too short to settle every argument, so we return to the objects themselves. A merchant presses a seal into wet clay. A potter scratches a mark into a vessel. A worker receives a tablet bearing signs that everyone nearby can recognize. The meaning may have been practical and immediate. It may have answered questions no more mysterious than who owned a bundle or where a shipment began. To the people of the city, these signs were not a puzzle. They belonged to familiar life. A craftsperson may have repeated them for years. Someone learned the correct order and corrected the hand of an apprentice. Somewhere, the signs had sounds, even if those sounds have vanished from memory. The silence belongs to us, not to them. Tonight, the lantern moves across symbols carved more than 4,000 years ago. Their edges remain sharp. The message survives where it was placed, yet we stand outside it like travelers before a locked door whose key was lost in another age. Perhaps one day a longer text will be found. Perhaps a bilingual inscription waits beneath an unexcavated floor or in the ruins of a distant port. For now, the signs remain closed. But the seal has already told us something. It tells us that the Indus people named, counted, marked, remembered, and recognized. Their writing does not need to be readable to prove that a world of meaning once stood behind it. Beyond the workshop, goods are being prepared for a journey. The seals will travel with them, carrying unread words westward across rivers, deserts, and the sea. Section 9. Beyond the workshops, the city opens toward the roads and rivers that carried Indus goods far from home. At first, the journey is small. A cart leaves a neighborhood with baskets, jars, and wrapped bundles. A boat moves along a channel toward a larger river. From there, goods can travel south toward the coast or west across difficult country. Every stage depends on people who know the route, the season, the weight of a load, and the places where water can be found. Trade joined the Indus world from within before it connected it to distant lands. Stone arrived from hills and mountains. Shell came inland from the sea. Copper moved from mining regions into workshops. Grain, cotton, beads, tools, and pottery passed between settlements of different sizes. Some places specialized in crafts. Others stood near routes where goods could be gathered and sent onward. The cities were not isolated centers surrounded by silence. They belonged to a wide network of movement. Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and other settlements were linked by rivers, roads, and shared practices. A merchant could travel through places whose buildings differed, yet still recognize familiar weights, seals, and measures. The same habits that organized trade within the civilization also made longer journeys possible. To the west lay the Arabian Sea. Indus settlements near the coast gave access to maritime routes. Boats could follow the shoreline between inlets, islands, and ports where crews found shelter and supplies. The voyage was dangerous, shaped by changing winds, shallow water, salt, and storm. Yet contact across the sea continued. Indus objects have been found in regions connected with ancient Oman and Bahrain. Bahrain was known in Mesopotamian records as Dilmun, a place important in trade between distant shores. Oman is often linked with the ancient land called Magan. These names come from texts written outside the Indus world. They show how Mesopotamian scribes understood the geography of exchange, though not what the people of those lands called themselves. Mesopotamian records also mention a distant place called Meluha. Many scholars connect Meluha with the Indus civilization or with part of its trading world. The identification is strong but should still be treated with care. The name survives in Mesopotamian writing, not in an Indus inscription we can read. Once again, the people appear in the records of others while their own words remain closed. From Meluha came goods valued in Western cities. Texts and archaeology point toward carnelian, shell, wood, metals, and other traded goods. Beads made with Indus techniques have been found far from the places where their stone was shaped. Indus-style seals also appeared beyond South Asia. Each object marks a journey made by merchants, sailors, animals, and laborers whose names are gone. Imagine one of those journeys beginning at dusk. A bundle of polished carnelian beads is checked against stone weights. A seal is pressed into clay. Jars are secured. The cargo moves toward the river and then toward the sea. Weeks later, the same beads may appear in a market where the language, clothing, buildings, and gods are different. The object remains familiar even when the world around it changes. Trade carried more than materials, it carried gestures, measurements, stories, and expectations. A merchant learned which goods were desired in another port. A craftsperson adapted a design. Foreign objects entered Indus settlements, while Indus goods reached households far to the west. There may even have been Indus merchants living abroad. Mesopotamian texts refer to people associated with Meluha, including interpreters who may have helped bridge languages. The details are fragmentary, and certainty must remain limited. Still, the need for an interpreter suggests a meeting between people whose speech was not the same. For a moment, the silence of the script becomes almost audible. Somewhere in a western port, an Indus merchant speaks to a local trader. A third person carries meaning between them. Prices are discussed, weights are compared, a seal is recognized. The conversation disappears as soon as it is spoken, but the exchange leaves objects behind. That is how the trade routes preserve human contact. Not as a complete story, but as traces. A bead in a foreign grave, a seal in a distant settlement, a name written by another civilization, a route remembered through the goods that crossed it. As the vessel turns eastward, the Indus coast waits beyond the dark water. The merchants will bring home unfamiliar materials and stories from cities where rulers carved their names into stone. Yet in their own cities, royal names remain absent. The trade routes show us that the Indus world was connected and recognized beyond its borders. They also lead us back to one of its deepest questions. Where were its kings? Section 10. The trade routes return us to the cities with a question still waiting at their center. Where were the kings? In Egypt, rulers raised monuments that carried their names across centuries. In Mesopotamia, kings appeared in inscriptions, temples, palaces, and stories of conquest. Their victories were recorded, and their tombs gathered wealth around the dead. The Indus cities offer no equivalent certainty. There are large buildings, raised platforms, fortified walls, and neighborhoods that required organized labor. Some houses were larger, and rare materials were unevenly distributed. Yet no structure has been securely identified as a royal palace. No tomb has been accepted as the burial place of an Indus king. No readable inscription announces a ruler by name. The civilization shows power without giving power a face. At Mohenjo-daro, a small stone figure is often called the priest king. He wears a patterned garment over one shoulder. His eyes are narrow. A band crosses his forehead. The title is memorable, but it is modern. We do not know whether he was a priest, a king, both, or neither. He may have represented an important person or an ideal figure whose meaning has been lost. The name tells us more about our expectations than about him. When archaeologists first encountered the cities, they searched for familiar signs of ancient rule. They expected palaces, temples, royal statues, and written proclamations. The Indus world did not present itself that way. Its public spaces were carefully built, but they did not clearly celebrate one ruler. That absence does not mean the cities were equal. Some homes were larger. Valuable materials were not distributed evenly. Skilled crafts and long-distance trade created opportunities for wealth. Authority must have existed somewhere because streets were maintained, bricks were standardized, drains were repaired, and large projects were completed. The mystery lies in how that authority was organized. Perhaps rulers existed but expressed power differently. Their residences may not have survived, or we may have mistaken them for other buildings. Perhaps several powerful families shared control. Merchants, landholders, and ritual specialists may have balanced one another. Different cities may have governed themselves while accepting shared standards. It is also possible that authority depended more upon institutions than one celebrated individual. A council can direct labor without building a statue of itself. A merchant group can protect weights and routes without carving a list of victories. A religious tradition can shape public life without leaving an obvious temple. The archaeological record preserves walls and objects more easily than meetings, customs, and spoken agreements. We should not turn uncertainty into fantasy. The absence of a known palace does not prove that the Indus people lived without hierarchy. The lack of royal tombs does not prove that rulers never existed. Archaeology can show differences in wealth and organization, but it cannot always reveal who made a decision. Still, the contrast remains striking. The cities were disciplined without being covered in royal images. Their order appears in ordinary structures: wells, drains, brick platforms, workshops, streets, and waits reveal coordination more clearly than monuments to an individual. Perhaps legitimacy came from maintaining the system. A ruler who kept water moving and markets trusted may not have needed to place a face on every wall. Perhaps power was expressed through reliability. The city worked, the measures held, goods traveled, houses were rebuilt, the agreement continued. At sunset, we climb one of the raised mounds and look over the city. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Workers leave their workshops. Water is carried home. A seal is pressed into clay before a bundle begins its journey. Somewhere, decisions are being made. A street will be repaired. Labor will be gathered. Yet no trumpet announces the name of the person responsible. The city moves through systems larger than any one life. That may be why its political world remains so difficult to recover. Power has left behind its effects, but not its explanation. As darkness settles, the figure called the Priest King returns to the shelf of the archive. His expression remains unreadable. He does not tell us whom he served or whether anyone served him. Beyond him, the cities are beginning to change. Trade routes weaken, some settlements shrink, rivers alter their courses. The great urban pattern that endured for centuries begins to loosen, not in one sudden night, but through many quiet changes. The question of how the Indus cities were ruled now gives way to another. How did their urban world come apart? Section 11. The cities do not disappear all at once. There is no single night when every lamp goes dark. No final ruler closes the gates. No invading army leaves one clear layer of destruction across the Indus world. Instead, the urban pattern loosens slowly, as though a woven cloth is pulled apart one thread at a time. After centuries of growth, many cities began to change around the beginning of the second millennium before our era. Some neighborhoods were abandoned. Long-distance trade became less active. Standardized weights and seals appeared less often. Pottery styles shifted. Large urban centers lost population, while smaller settlements continued elsewhere. The change was real, but uneven. Mohenjo-daro did not decline in the same way or at the same moment as every other settlement. Harappa continued through periods of rebuilding. In some regions, people moved toward smaller towns and villages. In others, communities adapted to new waterways. The civilization was not erased. Its urban system was reorganized. Rivers were part of that story. Channels changed course across the plains. Some waterways became less reliable. Others flooded with greater force or moved away from places that depended upon them. A city beside water can survive many seasons of repair, but repeated changes may make old systems harder to maintain. Climate may also have shifted. Evidence suggests that summer monsoon rains weakened over time in parts of the region. Less dependable rainfall would have affected crops, pasture, wells, and seasonal rivers. Such changes rarely destroy a civilization alone. They place pressure upon systems carrying the weight of trade, population, and urban upkeep. The cities had always required cooperation. Drains needed cleaning, wells needed repair, brick walls had to be rebuilt after floods, grain had to move from fields into crowded neighborhoods. Crafts depended upon materials arriving from distant places. When one connection weakened, others became harder to sustain. The sea routes were changing as well. Trade with Mesopotamia declined. Western cities that had received goods linked with Meluha entered periods of disruption. Fewer ships may have crossed the old routes. Workshops dependent upon distant demand would have felt the change through smaller orders, fewer merchants, and longer silences. For the people living through it, the transformation may not have felt like the end of a civilization. A family might leave one neighborhood for another. A merchant might abandon a route that no longer paid. Farmers could move toward land where water remained dependable. Craftspeople might carry their skills into smaller settlements. Children born during the change would know the altered world as ordinary. This is how great systems often come apart, not through one dramatic moment, but through decisions made in kitchens, workshops, markets, and fields. One household moves, one well dries, one street is no longer repaired, a boat fails to arrive, a town grows while a city empties. Older explanations once imagined a violent conquest sweeping through the Indus cities. That idea has not held up well. There is no clear evidence for one invading force destroying the civilization. Conflict may have occurred in some places, but it does not explain the broad transformation across such a large region. The truth is quieter. Environmental change, shifting rivers, altered trade, and movements of people likely interacted over generations. No single cause needs to carry the whole story. A civilization spread across such an enormous territory could not have ended in only one way. Even the word collapse can mislead us. Cities declined, but people endured. Traditions survived in altered forms. Farming continued. Crafts continued. Settlements appeared in new places. The descendants of those who had lived in the great cities did not vanish. They carried memory, language, customs, and skills forward, even if we cannot trace every line. The urban age became something else. At night, we walk once more through Mohenjo-daro. A drain is filled with silt. A courtyard stands empty. Wind moves through rooms where a roof once held back the weather. Yet beyond the city, fires still burn in smaller settlements. Grain is still ground. Animals are still led toward water. Life has moved, not ended. The silence of the ruins can make abandonment feel absolute. But the people of the Indus world were never contained by brick walls. The civilization existed in habits, relationships, measurements, crafts, and ways of understanding land and water. When the cities changed, much of that world traveled with those who left. The last question is not why everyone disappeared. It is what remained after the streets grew quiet, and how a civilization without readable words continued to speak through everything it left behind. Section 12. The final seal rests beside the lantern. Its animal remains clear, its signs remain closed. Around it lie the other objects gathered during our journey. A stone weight shaped to a shared measure. A bead polished until it caught the light. A fragment of brick made according to a familiar proportion. None can tell us the name of a ruler or the sound of a prayer, yet together they speak with quiet persistence. The Indus world was not preserved through one great monument. It survived in systems, streets aligned across crowded cities, wells descended through generations of rebuilding, water moved beneath walls through drains designed for daily use. Merchants trusted weights carried from one market to another. Craftspeople repeated techniques learned through practice. Seals marked goods with signs that were ordinary to those who used them and mysterious only to us. This is the difference between being forgotten and being unread. A forgotten world leaves almost nothing behind. The Indus civilization is not like that. Its cities remain visible. Its settlements stretch across an enormous landscape. Archaeologists can study its bricks, map its roads, follow its trade, and trace changes through layers of soil. What we lack is not evidence. We lack the voices that would explain the evidence from within. Without readable writing, we cannot ask a merchant what the signs on a seal meant. We cannot ask a builder who ordered the repair of a street. We cannot learn what names people gave to the rivers or what stories they told about the animals carved in stone. We cannot know whether the Great Bath was sacred, political, communal, or all of these at once. The silence invites imagination, but it also demands humility. It is easy to fill an empty space with certainty. A seated figure becomes a god. A large building becomes a palace. A change in settlement becomes a sudden disaster. Yet, the Indus world has taught us to move carefully. When the evidence does not speak clearly, the honest answer is sometimes that we do not know. That uncertainty does not make the civilization less important. Its greatest achievements may have been the repeated acts that allowed dense communities to endure. Repairing a drain, drawing water from a well, checking a measure, shaping a brick, teaching an apprentice, packing goods for a journey. These actions rarely enter ancient histories, but cities cannot survive without them. The ruins preserve the labor of people whose names are gone. A mason placed one brick against another and made a wall that still casts a shadow. A bead maker drilled through hard stone with a tool held steady by experience. Someone swept a courtyard at sunrise. Someone cleared silt from a drain. Someone pressed a seal into wet clay and trusted that the mark would be understood far away. These lives were not silent when they were lived. The streets held bargaining voices, footsteps, animals, water, and work. Children learned signs that scholars still cannot read. Families gathered in courtyards after the heat of the day. Boats carried cargo toward the sea. Fires burned inside workshops. The quiet belongs to the ruins, not to the civilization itself. As we leave Mohenjo-daro, moonlight falls across the old streets one final time. Rainwater gathers beside a wall and follows the slope of a bathing floor. It enters a narrow channel, slips beneath the road, and disappears into darkness. For a brief moment, the city performs one of the tasks for which it was built. The water moves, the bricks hold, the ancient design answers the storm. Perhaps this is how the Indus world continues to speak. Not through a voice we can translate, but through forms that still reveal intention. A drain tells us that someone cared where water went. A weight tells us that strangers agreed upon value. A seal tells us that identity mattered. A planned street tells us that private lives were joined to a larger order. The questions remain. Who maintained that order? What language stood behind the signs? What did the people call themselves? Which memories traveled forward after the great cities changed? Future discoveries may open some of these doors. A longer inscription may still wait beneath the earth. Until then, the silence must remain part of the story. We close the case around the seal and return it to its place in the archive. The lamps burn lower. Beyond the windows, the river continues through the night, carrying water past fields, villages, and the buried edges of cities waiting to be understood. Our path now turns away from brick streets and hidden drains. Ahead, stones rise beneath open skies. They stand in circles, lines, chambers, and solitary shapes across distant landscapes. Some were built for the dead. Some appear to follow the sun, the moon, and the stars. The cities have left us with unread words. The stones will ask whether the sky itself became a kind of memory. And now, seekers, our journey through the Indus world has come to an end. The lanterns of the archive are growing dim, and the ancient streets are returning once more to silence. You do not need to follow them any farther tonight. From here, the music will carry you onward. Settle more deeply into your bed. Let the rain, the firelight, and the quiet sounds of the scholar's study remain with you as sleep begins to gather. Good night, seekers. The archive will still be here when you return.
Mm-hmm.